All right, Patrick here, Life Lessons for My Sons. Hey guys. Today's brief history of the central banks of the world and the U.S. central banks. Believe it or not, there was banks before the Federal Reserve and even before all the U.S. central banks. So the first bank, here's a photo of it, the Swedish Riksbank, created in 1668. The second central bank, the Bank of England, was created in 1694. The fourth bank, Banque de France, created in 1800. I say the fourth, and I just want to get to the U.S. bank. The first Bank of the United States was actually the third central bank, and that was created in 1791 to 1811. Now, Thomas Jefferson, he was president 1801 to 1809. He was the third U.S. president and founding father. He was against the central banks. Here's his quote: "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered." Thomas Jefferson, 1802. That was a year after he got into office. So that first central bank, there was a tiebreaker, and it was voted down by the vice president at the time, which was George Clinton of New York. So he voted down the renewal of the charter in 1811. And there was no bank again until 1816, when the politicians got together and created the second Bank of the United States. Here's a photo of that. This is actually the fifth central bank. And Andrew Jackson, he vetoed the second central bank, the charter renewal, in 1836. Here's his quote. He was the seventh president from 1829 to 1837. "If the people only understood the rank injustice of our money and banking system, there would be a revolution before morning." So he got rid of that one. So I just want to show a photo of the central bankers. These guys, this was the 8 of 6 men that ended up in Jekyll Island. And 6 of these guys were members of the First Name Club. These guys were directed by Senator Aldrich. He was a member of the club. He was a Rhode Island senator and chair of the Senate Finance Committee. Here's the 6 members. Paul Warburg, he was a German financier, partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company. A. Piet Andrew, he was a Harvard professor and assistant treasury secretary. Henry Davidson, he was partner at J.P. Morgan. Arthur Sheldon, private secretary to Senator Aldrich. And Frank Vanderlip, he was president of the National City Bank. So these guys, so you had 6 guys going down. They were to meet at the train stations up in the Northeast. I believe it was Jersey and Rhode Island. And they got on Senator Aldrich's private train car on an evening in November in the dark. And they were instructed to only use first names if they ever interact with other members of that group, so as to nobody would know their names, and the whole thing was super hush-hush and secretive. So hence these guys became the members of the First Name Club. And so in November 1910, they were headed down to Jekyll Island, which is a private club off the coast of Georgia that J.P. Morgan was a member of, and he didn't go, but he organized this trip. So here's a picture, the First Name Club. Here's another picture of the club at Jekyll Island. And then here's a picture of the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. So they created the Aldrich Plan. They worked on it for a few years. They thought it was going to die, but evidently Wilson wanted a central bank, and so they sent him the Aldrich Plan, and he signed into law on December 23rd, 1913 by Wilson. So then we had our Federal Reserve in 1913, and we still have it today. And here's a map of the 12 districts. It's pretty interesting. At the time, you can see the districts were mostly concentrated on the whole East Coast. You can see, so here's a map of the districts and also their smaller offices. Here's the list too. I'll show the list. So you got Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, which has branches, Cincinnati, Ohio, Pittsburgh. Then you have a Bank of Richmond, Virginia, which has branches in Baltimore and Charlotte. Bank of Atlanta has branches in Birmingham, Jacksonville, Miami, Nashville, and New Orleans. Bank of Chicago, branch in Detroit, St. Louis, branch in Little Rock, Louisville, and Memphis. Bank of Minneapolis. I mean, you can see the list here. Screenshot it if you want. But it's really interesting. The Federal Bank of San Francisco, the 12th district, this has Los Angeles, California, Portland, Oregon, Salt Lake City, Seattle. This district is huge. Lately, I saw a list of the 3 wealthiest Americans, and one was California and one was Washington. So these districts really should be redrawn, but I don't know. I think a lot of people think the whole Fed should just go away altogether. And what's really interesting here is the ownership. So the Fed is not private and it's not Fed. And there's also no reserves. So here's a list of the New York Federal Reserve shareholder list. I just did the top 8 because the top 8 make up over 90%. And you can see Citibank and JP Morgan combined make up over 70%. Just those two. And then you got Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Bank of New York Mellon, HSBC, Deutsche Bank. So this wasn't even released until, I believe, 2020 with the Freedom of Information Act. And I find it fascinating that it's not Fed. So there's 7 governors of the Federal Reserve Bank. They're all appointed by the U.S. president. Banks are not owned by the Fed. They're owned by private banks. And so when you think about this, you think about the quotes that Jefferson and Jackson gave in the history of the banks, the fighting with the banks. And the original creation of these central banks were supposed to stop booms and busts. There was not supposed to be any more booms and busts. So can you guys tell me today, here in 2021, that there's no booms or busts? Anybody that's been around the last 20 years knows there's booms and busts. You had 08, 09, and now you got 2020, 2021. So it's kind of funny. So that's just a brief history of the Central Reserve Banks I wanted to talk about. I'm going to do more. I'm going to talk about the Federal Reserve mandate, the dual mandate. I'm going to talk about currency and why they get created by the Fed, and is it constitutional? Is it not constitutional? I'll be bringing all that to you guys in future videos. You can see up here or here. And I'll tag you in the screen. Thanks guys for watching. I hope you guys learned something from this. If I left anything out, please comment and let me know. Maybe I'll revise it. Thanks.